by the Chiefs in recent years. Everyone's trying to keep up with Mahomes. Back-to-back Super Bowl appearances, they've hoisted the Lombardi, but their most recent trip, that stinging loss to Tampa. Kansas City trying to match the Patriots, Bills, and Dolphins as the only teams to reach at least 3 straight Super Bowls. The Chiefs drafted you into the league back in 2008. Brandon, how do they get back to the Super Bowl and win it again?
They're definitely getting back this year. You know, when you have Patrick Mahomes under center, you have Travis Kelce on the offense side of the ball, along with Tyreek Hill, they're going to get back. I don't think it's an AFC team that's suited to beat them in the playoffs. Regular season, yes, you might can get them, but in the playoffs, Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid is tough. But for them to hold up that Lombardi trophy, they will just have to keep Patrick Mahomes upright. When you give Patrick Mahomes time, he can make magic happen in the pocket or even outside the pocket. Just in the Super Bowl, if it was a head-to-head game with Kansas City having all their offensive line pieces on the offensive side of the ball, it would have been a totally different game. We can kind of get blindsided and forget how great this offense was because of what the Super Bowl left in our mouth and that sour taste it left in our mouths about the Chiefs. But let's not get it twisted. This is a great Kansas City Chiefs team that will get back to the Super Bowl. And if they can protect Patrick Mahomes, they will hold up that trophy this year.
The Ravens, Bills, Titans among the teams in the AFC trying to prevent the Chiefs from getting that 3rd straight. Your other former team, the Chargers, in the division, are a lot of people's dark horse team this year, a surprising team that might make a lot of noise with Justin Herbert there in year 2. Are you one of those people?
I was one of these people for the past few years, and the Chargers let me down so many times. So I can't go with the Chargers being a contender this year just because they have a couple moving pieces. Brandon Staley is he's going to be a great head coach for the Los Angeles Chargers, but he's bringing a 3-4 system back to a system where Gus Bradley just left and they ran a 4-3. So Tom Telesco have to revamp this roster to put the right pieces, in place to be successful. This year will be a fill-out year to see if these guys can fit this Brandon Staley system, but it's going to take them a year or two to get on the right page defensively. And on the offensive side of the ball, Justin Herbert, he has Mr. Lombardi being his offensive coordinator this year. This isn't the same offensive coordinator from last year, so we'll see if he has some growing pains or will the offense be catered to what he loves. So we just have to sit back and see how the Los Angeles Chargers will just lay it all out for their playmakers.
And the other 2 teams in the division, the Raiders and Broncos, both with huge questions coming into the year. The Raiders need that defense to come together quickly. The Broncos. Hello and welcome into NFL Total Access alongside Steve Wyche and Tom Pelissero. I'm Omar Reese, and as mentioned, we have Mr. Brightside himself, former Pro Bowl corner Brandon Flowers, also here to help break down his old division, the AFC West. Killmonger haircut there, Brandon. Welcome to NFL Total Access, man.
Thanks for having me. And I'm loving these highlights that's being shown. It's taking 10 years off of my age. I feel 25 again. Thinking I might lace them up and go take the field today.
We're excited to have you, Brandon. Half the league excited to be in Lake Tahoe this weekend for the American Century Championship, including Sean McDermott. He'll join us in just a little bit. Aaron Rodgers will also take part this weekend. Busy few days for him. Last night, he was teeing off against Tom Brady in the charity golf event, The Match. Rodgers, paired with Bryson DeChambeau, beat Brady and his partner Phil Mickelson. But when they saw an actual bear on the course, announcer Brian Anderson asked Rodgers if he'd be in uniform for the Packers when Green Bay plays the Chicago Bears this fall.
October 17th, Packers-Bears. Any idea who's going to be there? Anybody who's going to be quarterbacking in the number 12 jersey?
Yeah, I don't know, BA. Let's see.
How about,
won't we?
How about September 12th then? Will you go for that one?
What's that one?
That would be the opener against the Saints.
Oh.
All cheesers rejoice.
Yeah, I don't know, BA. We'll see.
Okay.
I know you're a Milwaukee guy.
Oh, he was ready. Once again, Aaron Rodgers not diffusing the situation between he and the Packers. And to be fair, not pouring gasoline on it either. If you're looking at this, Brandon, from the perspective of someone in the locker room, what are you thinking about all this?
I'm looking at this as Aaron Rodgers has played his last down as a Green Bay Packer. He's done everything but got on his knees and say, hey, I do not want to be here anymore. He expressed that he doesn't feel wanted. He doesn't feel included in anything. The receivers that he had on the roster that he said, hey, I would like this guy here for me to be successful, they didn't grant his wish with that. And the trump card was not going for it on 4th down in the playoffs against Tom Brady. If you got any top tier quarterback in the NFL, even mid tier, your head coach and your offensive coordinator is going to help you on 4th down, get that touchdown to try to win that playoff game at home. So he's feel unappreciated, unwanted. And if you're the Green Bay Packers, grant him his wish. You don't want this guy to come in and basically be unhappy in the locker room when you got guys like Davante Adams on the last year of their deal. You don't want this trickling down to any of your other stars to maybe spark their interest to want to leave town. So I think he done played his last down. Green Bay just needs to meet him halfway and make this happen.
Yeah, Brandon, I don't think they're going to trade him. I think it's either plays in Green Bay or he's not playing this year. But I got to tell you, for most of the summer and spring, I felt the same way you did. But what caught my attention is earlier this week when Aaron Rodgers was talking about his mental health, and he's starting to think about the things that make him happy. And see, I didn't take it as if he's at peace yet or he's going to step away from football to get to peace. But to me, that left an area open that maybe he has done some things this summer. We know he got engaged. We know he's been in the tropics and playing golf and things like that have made him prioritize the things in his life and come to some type of mental peace as to where playing football is something maybe he'll do again. He'll let certain things go to play for his teammates. So I'm kind of hung up in the middle, Tom, as to what's going to happen.
Brandon raises a valid point in terms of whether or not this relationship can be sustainable. Even if Aaron Rodgers rejoins and plays for the Packers in 2021, is there any type of a long-term fix here? However, short-term, organizationally, you create a lot more problems than you solve by trading away Aaron Rodgers. We talk about the dynamic in the locker room. Aaron Rodgers is beloved in that locker room. You trade him away, basically saying we're going into a sort of almost a rebuilding mode here. That's not going to sit well with guys like Davante Adams. You would have a line of Packers who would want to get out at that point. The coaches have a fantastic relationship with Aaron Rodgers. A lot of them would not be happy when you're hitting reboot and redoing a lot of the different things that they've been preparing to do with Aaron Rodgers and revamping the offense right as you get to training camp. So now you've ticked off your players, you've ticked off your coaches, and you're also putting Jordan Love in a really tricky spot. Not that he is not prepared for this moment to be a starting quarterback, but this is a guy who's never even taken a preseason snap. To this point, the Packers have tried to do everything that they can to allow Aaron Rodgers to make his own decision and come back as painlessly as possible. They've offered him a contract. They've been open to make other adjustments to make him feel better about the situation. It comes down to, as it has for months now, how far Aaron Rodgers wants to push this. Does he show up on July 27th? Does he become a holdout? Does he announce his retirement? There's still a lot of different levers that he can pull, and you're talking about a very calculated individual who definitely has a plan, even if he's not going to share that during a celebrity golf match.
Brandon, you alluded to that 4th down decision in the NFC Championship game. Aaron Rodgers, one of the most accomplished players, most dominant quarterbacks of his generation. Tom Brady not letting him forget about that during that match. He kept ribbing him yesterday in that golf matchup as well as the lead up to it. So interesting. There's a few people in the world that can talk about Aaron Rodgers like that. Tom Brady certainly one of them. One of the teams mentioned as a possible trade destination, if the Packers were willing, would be the Denver Broncos. Of course, their division has been dominated by the Chiefs in recent years. Everyone's trying to keep up with Mahomes. Back-to-back Super Bowl appearances. They've hoisted the Lombardi, but their most recent trip, that stinging loss to Tampa. Kansas City trying to match the Patriots, Bills, and Dolphins as the only teams to reach at least 3 straight Super Bowls. The Chiefs drafted you into the league back in 2008. Brandon, how do they get back to the Super Bowl and win it again?
They're definitely getting back this year. You know, when you have Patrick Mahomes under center, you have Travis Kelce on the offense side of the ball, along with Tyreek Hill, they're going to get back. I don't think it's an AFC team that's suited to beat them in the playoffs. Regular season, yes, you might can get them, but in the playoffs, Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid is tough. But for them to hold up that Lombardi trophy, they will just have to keep Patrick Mahomes upright. When you give Patrick Mahomes time, he can make magic happen in the pocket or even outside the pocket. Just in the Super Bowl, if it was a head-to-head game with Kansas City having all their offensive line pieces on the offensive side of the ball, it would have been a totally different game. We can kind of get blindsided and forget how great this offense was because of what the Super Bowl left in our mouth and that sour taste it left in our mouths about the Chiefs. But let's not get it twisted. This is a great Kansas City Chiefs team that will get back to the Super Bowl. And if they can protect Patrick Mahomes, they will hold up that trophy this year.
The Ravens, Bills, Titans among the teams in the AFC trying to prevent the Chiefs from getting that third straight. Your other former team, the Chargers, in the division, are a lot of people's dark horse team this year, a surprising team that might make a lot of noise with Justin Herbert there in year two. Are you one of those people?
I was one of these people for the past few years, and the Chargers let me down so many times. So I can't go with the Chargers being a contender this year just because they have a couple moving pieces. Brandon Staley is he's going to be a great head coach for the Los Angeles Chargers, but he's bringing a 3-4 system back to a system where Gus Bradley just left and they ran a 4-3. So Tom Telesco have to revamp this roster to put the right pieces, in place to be successful. This year will be a fill-out year to see if these guys can fit this Brandon Staley system, but it's going to take them a year or two to get on the right page defensively. And on the offensive side of the ball, Justin Herbert, he has Mr. Lombardi being his offensive coordinator this year. This isn't the same offensive coordinator from last year, so we'll see if he has some growing pains or would the offense be catered to what he loves. So we just have to sit back and see how the Los Angeles Chargers will just lay it all out for their playmakers.
And the other two teams in the division, the Raiders and Broncos, both with huge questions coming into the year. The Raiders need that defense to come together quickly. The Broncos need better play at quarterback with either Teddy Bridgewater or Drew Lock. Which of those two scenarios is more likely to happen, you think?
I'm leaning towards the Las Vegas Raiders here, more because the stability at quarterback. Derek Carr and John Gruden, I mean, these guys have got better year after year. They're getting comfortable. They know what each other likes. You know, Carr isn't taking what Gruden says to him personal now. The Achilles heel for this Raiders team is going to be their defense, and that's why they brought in Gus Bradley. Gus Bradley knew he needed to get some turnovers for his offense, so they brought in a veteran like Casey Hayward. They went into the draft and drafted the top safety in the draft to go with Abrams. So they're trying to revamp this defense slowly but surely because they know the defense is going to be the Achilles heel, and they're trying to get back on the right track, which I think they will.
And there's no question, Brendan, just like last season, I think we can expect a bunch of... Oh, Sean, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having me, guys.
Steve Weich back with us as well. Now, Sean, did you play with Andrew Whitworth and Kyle Williams today? Get any cool stories from their LSU days?
Yeah, you know what? But they played with me. You know, they were in my foursome. So yeah, we played a little bit of golf today. But no, they're good. They're good sticks. They hit it well, and I just kind of chased them around.
Sean, you're there with a bunch of different head coaches: Sean Payton, Matt Nagy, to name a couple. Is it more about the camaraderie up there, or the competition with you guys?
I don't know. This is my first time here, so I think we'll see. We're all competitive by nature. Everyone wants to talk about on the range, having fun and playing stress-free golf. I'm anxious to see how that unfolds once we get on the course here.
Steve?
Sean, I must commend you on the brim. I mean, a very nice hat you are rocking right there because we do know the sun beams pretty high at about 6,000 feet where you are in Tahoe.
Yeah, and I don't really tan very well, Steve, so I got to make sure I'm protected out here and then also representing the Bills at the same time.
Hey, Sean, you know, you heard Omar just mention some of the coaches, like Sean Payton, some of these offensive minds. But you look at your division, all the head coaches there, you, Brian Flores, Robert Saleh, Bill Belichick, are defensive coaches. And when you look at the coaching hiring cycle, there's all this talk about offense. And do you feel that you guys are unique in this and that oftentimes leadership and communication is overlooked for maybe a supposed strength on one side of the ball?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, each of us have our own team, obviously, and I think within those teams, the players look at their head coaches, in this case in the AFC East, and they may say, well, hey, my coach is a defensive guy, or my coach is an offensive guy, mainly defense in our division, as you mentioned. But again, when you're a head coach, there's big picture items, and that's really where we spend most of our time. And, you know, obviously my background specifically is defense, but the leadership aspect of the job is first and foremost.
Sean, when we spoke last year, a lot of the credit you gave for Josh Allen's performance with that MVP candidacy was the continuity he had with Brian Dable and some of the other personnel there on your staff. Where would you like to see Josh Allen improve this year as he looks to sustain that level of excellence?
I mean, Josh has just done such an incredible job. He's wired the right way. He puts in a lot of time and effort, I can tell you that, when he's away from us in honing his craft and the work he puts in with Jordan Palmer. And so every year Josh has come back from the time off, he's gotten better, and he's worked on a couple of aspects in particular of his game. And so this year has been no different to this point. And then now that he's been away from us and as we head into camp, I'm anxious to see how he looks again and how he's improved in the time that we've been apart here over the last 4 or 5 weeks.
Hey, Sean, this is Steve again. And you and General Manager Brandon Beane have not been shy in saying that Josh Allen is going to be your quarterback there for a long time. There's been talk of a potential extension with Josh before the season. Do you think that gets done, or do you think because you guys actually have him for another 2 more years, this will get done along the way during that time frame?
Yeah, Steve, I know Brandon mentioned that, I think, at the end of the spring practice period there, and these things handle themselves. They work themselves out when you got two parties that want to be together and have the same end goal in mind. And so, Josh is a great young talent, and he fits just so well with Buffalo and the city and the town and the people of Buffalo. And so I firmly believe it's going to work itself out.
Sean, there's also an issue that every coach is going to have to face when training camp starts, and that's the whole vaccination issue, the COVID-19 vaccinations. And we saw your wide receiver, Cole Beasley, come out on Twitter and say he's not going to get vaccinated. He would actually rather die living the way he wants to live. Has that been addressed, or how do you plan to address that with your players when you get them all together in a couple weeks?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that obviously our whole world has dealt with over the last year, and then since the vaccines have become available, now we're dealing with new decisions that we all have to make. And I think the best thing we can do is educate ourselves, build awareness, and then the individuals have to make their own decisions. And so we have to respect each and every one of the positions that are out there, and at the end of the day, do what's in the best interest of your situation specifically and the families that we're talking about here. And so as far as the team goes, I trust our leadership, our player-driven leadership, and they've been known to make good decisions, and I trust that moving forward that'll be the case.
Sean McDermott, head coach of the Buffalo Bills, looking to defend that AFC East championship and win one more game, Sean, and get to the Super Bowl here in Los Angeles this season. Thank you again. And
well, Omar, there are 20 days until most teams open training camp, and at this point, 68% of players league-wide have had at least their first shot of the vaccine. That's in line with the general U.S. population, but actually about 15% higher than similarly aged men nationwide. There are 5 teams that have at least 85% of their players who have had at least one shot, and virtually all Tier 1 and Tier 2 staff are already fully vaccinated. Now, it's important to understand that the vaccine is not mandatory for players. It is mandatory for coaches and other staff to maintain their Tier 1 or Tier 2 status unless they get a special exemption. Monday represents a deadline of sorts. At that point, you would either need to have your second shot or your sole dose of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, or else you're going to be operating under heavy restrictions in training camp that include masks, social distancing, daily COVID testing, and travel restrictions. Omar?
Yeah, Tom, it'll be interesting to see how the normalcy for vaccinated players will influence those that are unvaccinated. Thank you, Tom. It's been 5 years since we've seen a winning football season for the Giants or Jets. Fans in New York running out of patience. Ownership right there with them for one of those teams, as explained in our latest Total Access Overtime. Mike Garafolo leading a discussion with David Carr, Kim Jones, and Cynthia Freeland on the state of New York.
Here for Total Access Overtime, TAOT to its friends. And look, we've got a New York crew with us here folks who are familiar with the New York area teams, or in some cases may have even played for them. So I want to make this a New York football central discussion. And look, we have not had many of them of late. We certainly haven't had them late in the season because these two teams have disappointed the last couple of years. But there's reasons for optimism for both of them. So let's start with you, Kim. You cover both of these teams on a regular basis. Let's talk about the Giants and Jets, what they've done in the offseason, and your thoughts for maybe which of the two teams is going to be the more improved team in 2021.
Well, I think when we talk about the more improved team, it almost has to be the New York Giants. The New York Jets are starting from scratch. Now, they're at a very good starting point with Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh, and there's a lot of hope within that organization, but it's going to take some time, and they have a core of a few players, literally 3 starters on defense back, Jamison Crowder on offense, and they're going to fill in all the way around the rest of them, and I should probably mention Mekhi Becton. As for the New York Giants, Mike, John Mara has set the directive. This is a playoff almost or bust kind of year. They spent that way in free agency. They were very, very happy about their draft. To those Giants fans still wondering about the O-line, Dave Gettleman said, we like our O-line better than the rest of you do. So they're set up, Mike, and this has to be the year, I think, for the New York Giants.
Yeah, Kim, I think if you just piggyback off of that and talk about the offensive line, that's going to be the key for Daniel Jones. You know, Daniel has had a propensity to turn the football over. He's had fumbles. But what I love about Daniel, and when you watch film on him, he's almost oblivious to the offensive line. So what you have to do there, you have to build that up. He doesn't really sense the pressure. And that can be a good thing and a bad thing at times. You know, ever since he jumped in there and started day one, you know, when he was in there, he would just stare right down the middle of the defense, pressure coming in his face, and make throw after throw. He needs a guy to help him. Kenny Golladay is going to help him. He's going to make all those other guys better. So when you talk about improving, you know, with Saquon Barkley coming back, the offensive line getting better, the Giants are going to be in a better position. Their defense played better from a point standpoint last year, so they're competing for a division. You know, so improvement for them is let's go compete to try to win this division again. For the Jets on the other side, I think when you look at what they're bringing in on the offensive side, you look back to when they had a rookie quarterback last time. You know, they had Mark Sanchez. They had a #1 defense in the league. They ran the football effectively. If they're going to do that again and have success with a young quarterback, you know, it's not going to be the same type of ugly winning. I think their offense is going to have to be a little bit better than what they had back in the day. I think that they can do that with the type of offense they're bringing in. Zach is a dynamic player. He has a ton of athletic ability, a ton of, you know, just raw quarterback skill, which you love to see. It just jumps off the film when you watch him. So I think he can actually be the guy that is the reason that they win, and not win in spite of him, not win because they have a great defense led by Robert Saleh or not led by their run game. I think that they can go out and actually produce quality, explosive offense with Zach Wilson at the quarterback position, depending on how the pieces around him, you know, improve. So, you know, are they going to be better than the Giants? I don't think so, but I think improvement for them is going to be a much better football team and a team that the Jets fans are going to be excited to watch.
The interesting part is that this is all in context of which division they're in. I mean, Zach Wilson's going to have to face a very difficult division. And if you look to see what he had in college in the transition, he didn't have a lot to worry about behind the line of scrimmage. He had a lot more time than he's going to have at the next level, just no matter what. Yes, the Jets did a great job also drafting a guard so that they could really kind of fortify that line with Mekhi Becton. But if you look to see what's missing for the Jets, I don't know what's going on in their secondary. Their defense, they did a lot of free agent moves, but they didn't really do a lot to the defensive backs, which means teams are going to be able to pass against them. That's not going to be the case for the Giants. The Giants actually have a really nice set of defensive backs. They address their defense. I think the Giants are in a very achievable division. When I look to see Daniel Jones taking that next step forward, the possibilities for him behind that O-line, of course, they have a second year. They're playing together a little bit better. I think that maybe we like that. Maybe Dave Gettleman doesn't know how much I like his O-line. Maybe I could tell him later. But I think when you think about all the different passing options and Saquon Barkley and this division, I think the Giants win more games than the Jets.
I want to double back on what, frankly, a few of or all of you touched on at some point here. To me, that Giants season last year was about establishing a new culture, really getting them to understand, you know, why did we win the games that we won and why were we competitive in some of those other games? Well, now it's not just going to be a learning lesson. It's not just going to be about, well, here's how many close games we were in. It's going to be about how many of these games are we going to finish? How many of these games are we going to win? It is, as Kim talked about, a playoffs or bust almost mandate from John Mara that we've seen in the past before. And you can start to sense that Mara's patience has run extremely thin, and it's not just going to be about moral victories or really starting to show up and compete. Now, that being said, I do want to go back to David. You talked about, starting things with Zach Wilson. Would that be, in your mind, a successful season for the Jets if all of a sudden they started to be at least more competitive and maybe won a few games? I mean, I don't think anybody's expecting them to be a postseason team, but is it almost an intangible thing for them that you could maybe see on the field start to develop and say, all right, yeah, the Jets are on the right path heading into 2022?
Yeah, you for sure can see it. I think that everyone, we talk about the eye test all the time. And when you watch an offensive player, you watch a quarterback play, you can tell if they're moving the football effectively. We watched the 49ers for the last couple of years. They've gone through injuries, but they always had a chance on offense, regardless of who was back there. And I think you're going to get the same thing with the Jets. Now, it might not look as nice as Kyle Shanahan's polished 49ers offense, but this thing is going to be in the same mold. They're going to utilize play action like we just saw. Zach Wilson has enough ability to kind of buy time and make plays outside the X's and O's when it's not always going to be perfect, especially if you are a Jets fan. They know that it always hasn't been perfect, but he has the raw ability to kind of take your team above the X's and O's and transcend what they can normally do inside that offense. So I think from that standpoint, it's going to be exciting to watch. I'm going to watch Jets games. I mean, let's be honest. How many times have we really tuned in to watch Jets games in the last couple of years, unless you're covering the team like you guys have been? But I think that I want to see what Zach is going to look like inside this offense, because this offense has quite honestly taken the league by storm, and it's been very effective. And I know they don't have the personnel as some of the other teams that run it, but they're going to be a team that can actually move the football and score points. So I'm excited to see how that pairs with Robert Saleh's defense. And so if you're a Jets fan, you got to be pumped about that.
Well, and they're going to use a lot of play action, David, as you know, and they fortified that left side of the offensive line. So this is Joe Douglas going out and getting some playmakers, but also protection for Zach Wilson. And that's just so important. We are going to measure this Jets season in ways that numbers folks, Cynthia, might not be as comfortable with. We are going to measure this Jets season in terms of hope. How much hope will they have at the end of this season that at the very least they have found their head coach, their franchise quarterback to make big strides? The Giants no longer have that luxury. This is year 3 for Daniel Jones, and the results are going to have to be, Mike, as you know as well as anyone, the results are going to have to be tangible, and they're going to have to be big. I don't think falling short and hoping that the Eagles beat a team in week 17 or 18, is going to be okay this year. I really don't think that's going to be all right.
I don't think that was all right with them to begin with. And I need to figure out a hope metric, because I heard a really good report that you made about how many players showed up to this Jets kind of OTA situation. You talked about it, and that really does show you it's not a super tangible number for numbers folks like me, but it does show you that there's a lot of hope already in the building. It seemed like players are excited to get back. It seemed like Robert Saleh has invigorated and kind of given a new life to this whole situation. And you talk about play action, and you talk about bringing in passing concepts. Well, you also brought in the opportunity for, Zach Wilson to make this his team with his head coach and with, Joe Douglas, who it's kind of his first full season, right? So at the end of the day, when you're talking about hope and you're talking about the dynamic there, I think we are kind of seeing that measurement, just how many players are showing up and how many players are engaged.
Yes, and the Jets have a slightly tougher schedule if you go by strength of schedule from last year. I know that's not a perfect way to do it, because certainly we expect the NFC East to be better, in large part because it's a lot difficult to be much worse than they were. But I want to double back with Kim, because Cynthia talked about that hope metric. And if you look at Adam Gase into Robert Saleh and the injection of energy in the building, that hope metric's already got to be rising up for the Jets. I mean, can you sense it already, having been around there a couple times this spring?
Yes, you can. And you can sense it when you talk to players on Zoom. Listen, Robert Saleh is someone who likes to connect with his players. That simply was not Adam Gase's strength, and the Jets paid for it in many, many ways. They were not a team that was in sync at times. We saw that with, the zero blitz against the the Raiders, right? Wasn't that against the Raiders, David?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and it was an ugly play. And
David, do you remember?
And you heard Marcus May, who's not he's a leader, but he's not necessarily I got to talk about this kind of guy. He couldn't help himself after that, and good for him. So he's still around, by the way, and the head coach and the defensive coordinator are not. Yes, there's a big, big difference in terms of connection. Cynthia, you noted my report. It was more than 80 players showed up for voluntary workouts. That's almost outrageous at such a high number. And I know
80, 100. I was close.
Robert Saleh were absolutely thrilled.
In a year where the NFLPA is trying to tell players to stay away. No, these players were blowing through that stop sign. So certainly a good sign there. This was fun. It's nice to talk about the teams in the biggest market in the league.
Cornerbacks in the NFL, and he's a great one. If you see right there, he can lay the hat on you. He can play man-to-man, take any receiver out of the game, whether it's a Tyreek Hill, a young fast receiver, or if it's a big receiver like Metcalf in this division. He can line up with anybody on that island and completely blank him and take him out of the game. That's why he's my number 4 cornerback.
Okay, wait, you said he can take guys out of the game. He puts the hat on people. He completely influences things, and he is 4? All right, we got to see your top 3, so get it rolling. If you got 3 better than Jalen Ramsey, let's start at 3.
Number 3, Jair Alexander. Jair Alexander was the stickiest in coverage and the most consistent corner all throughout the 2020 season last year. He showed flashes before, but in 2020, he put it all together. And if you compare Alexander to Ramsey, he had a lower completion percentage allowed, lower passing yards allowed, and passer rating allowed. He was better than Ramsey. So statistically, he had a better year than Jalen Ramsey, and that's why he's my number 3 corner. Going to number 2, we going with the X-Man down in Dade County, Xavier Howard. Let me give you a little history on this guy. 2018, he led the league in picks. 2019, he had an ACL injury. Last year, when you thought he was going to be a little rusty, he came and led the league in picks again. And what's unique about X-Man, he doesn't give up touchdowns. He just locks you down all game, whether it's zero pressure, where he has no safety over top, or is it 3